As you look on the cards you have and the agenda that you have today, the first session is we're going to talk about progress versus perfection. Now, when we think about progress, that's some kind of movement, right? We think about perfection, is it ever obtainable? Is perfection something that we can get where we always have all the answers and it's dialed in to where we can't make change? I would make the argument that no, that's not possible, right? We're always going to have something we can learn. We learn from each other, right? We don't have all the answers. You guys don't necessarily have the answers, but it's that give and take. It's that working together. So as a farm kid, you know, when I start to think about progress and how do we move forward, it's like I have to look back. I have to have some history, right? I had my grandparents on the farm that were involved in some of the wars and things we had early on. So how many of you guys know who this individual is? Anybody? We have no history people in this room today. Yes, right down in the front. General George S. Patton. And I think he has a quote that really helps me think about progress and perfection as we go forward. He said the quote one day was, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week." Now we say, okay, that's violently. What does that mean, right? Are we just going to go in guns blazing, no categorical thought? What are we doing? But when I start to think of the word violently and what it meant to them and what they were doing, it was actually making movement, right? Violently was making progress. They were defaulting to action to get involved to help understand some of the things that they were doing. So to get involved and start thinking about that, making action, there's one thing that all of us universally have that we start to think about that we have to weigh through as we decide what progress we're going to make. So I'm going to ask you again to think for a second. If you pull out your cell phone, what's the first thing you see? We pull them out of our pocket. We're on these things every day, sometimes more connected than we want to be. But if I pull this out or I look down on my right hand, the first thing I see is time, right? Time is something that we have to think about whenever we want to invest or get involved in something. But the other thing we see are the things we're passionate about, what we enjoy, what we value, what we work towards, right? Some of us, it might be a vacation. For me, it's usually my dog. My wife always asks, why can't I put her picture on there first? But I still love my dog. So we think about time, and we always want to understand it. So if we go to Webster's dictionary, time is the measured or measurable period during which an action happened, or it's a process, a condition, right? So we think of nutrient management, soil. We think of farming practices over time. That was a measure of our progress, a measure of our history. But very simply, it's a moment, an hour, a day, and a time on a calendar or a clock. You guys have invested the time to be here today, right? You invested the time in education. So when we think about that as at any moment, we look at time, how do we view time, right? In our busy lives, in our busy schedules. Would it be a fair assumption to say we treat time like a commodity? Something that's precious, something that we can't buy more of, something that we're never going to get back, and we can't predict the future. We don't know what the time is. But I think that's also something that we have in common, again, in the agricultural industry is nutrient management and soils, because the other commodity we have is land, right? We're not making more land, right? It's getting developed, it's getting consumed, it's getting collected by different groups, right? Sometimes investment groups, they turn into recreational items. So again, as we think of this commodity of land and commodity of our time, what can we do to maximize both of those as we think and go forward? But now that we know that we treat it like a commodity, we can't buy more, there's some things that we think about fundamentally. As we start to think about it is, how do we invest our time, right? On the surface, for us as individuals and as humans, we start to think about, okay, if I invest my time, what's it worth? Do I get more time with my family, for example? Do I invest my time to get more work done, right? Or do I invest in custom applications? Or the other part, for those of you that don't know me, I'm from the land of sugar beets, born and raised my whole life. But investing in education, again, just like you're here today. We invest in that time so we can get better. So once we understand if we're trying to get more time in education and resources and everything else, there's another way that we try to invest and buy our time, or try to maximize that time in the here and now. And that's with purchasing services, right? This group today, we have farmers, we have consultants, we have soil pullers, we have retail agronomists. Those are services that we can purchase. Those are services that we can get involved in, right? So maybe I need to purchase that soil sample. Maybe I need to get somebody to have that done. Or maybe I need to purchase the service from my local agronomist or my local co-op to get that application made. Some cases, geography-wise, I have a very small window. Maybe I'm going to make an investment in that application equipment to make sure I can get that application done timely. So we purchase services for efficiency and to buy time and an ROI. The second way is we involve ourselves, right? We look at the opportunity costs that we have. If I invest this many man-hours, what is this going to return me? What action, what ownership can I take in the process so I can, again, open up time? But the one that scares me the most, and I think about this as we get busy and we get hectic in our lives and all the decisions we have to make, is remaining static, right? When we think about progress over perfection, we can't remain static. Seen several of you that have been involved here in precision meetings before, and the most dangerous words we've always said over and over and over is, I've always done it this way. But really what that equates to is I'm going to bear a cost. I could be leaving opportunity out there in ever my business or as a farmer to get better from an ROI and from a time perspective. So as we think of that and all those things, calculating time, where do I want to be, where do I want to invest, you're all here today. So now we think of this as part of the start of evolution, right? We think of all things change. Nothing stays the same. The weather's going to change in 2 minutes. The comfort that you have in the chair is going to change in a few minutes, right? So I want to make sure I maximize the time. But agriculture is no exception. From the first seed that was sown with an old wooden handle back in 9000 BC, things started to make progress. Then we went into the first real horsepower, right? The oxen, the horse. Then we continued through the mechanization era, where we went and how we continued to progress. But then it started to switch, right? We start to think about how we started to change genetics. We look at the hybrid selections. We start looking at matching that on those acres and how that moves forward. And over time, we've continued to see increases, incrementally, year over year, depending on how the technology has changed. Or maybe if it's even in the chemistry we use. What pest are we trying to attack, right? They're always looking at modes of action. Some of those take 10 years to develop. 10 years is still progress because we're moving forward. So now we think about that in nutrient management and the soil sampling. We start looking at making recommendations and getting towards our target soil levels. And we say, okay, what's changing? What's the next step? Because if we break it all down very simply, nutrient management is a substantial portion of what you do in all the practice decisions. Whether you're the consultant, whether you're the soil puller, you play a vital role inside of there. So the soil sampling piece of this that we're going to hear a lot about today and a lot of different information is one of those pillars. And that helps us understand what the soil needs, right? How do we go from a macro standpoint to a micro standpoint, which I'll talk again here shortly. But then we can target fertilize. We start looking at variable rate, optimize that growth and that yield potential. And we start looking at the long-term health. And then also, we don't want to forget the stewardship that we have and the availability we have to maximize that commodity of land. How do we continue to make that go for years to come? So as we think about that, now we're going to switch just a little bit of gears. We know there's time, we know there's progress, but how have we managed our nutrient management in the past? Right? As we look at this, we've done it on a very macro level. We start looking at different quadrants. If I take this stage as a field, for example, maybe I've only pulled a couple samples here, and I made an assumption that the rest of this stage is going to be the same. Now, depending on what they serve us for lunch, there could be a low spot in the field if I eat too much at noon, but that's not a great representation, right? And what we're going to see is taking it from those macro level assumptions and small data sets that help us make those recommendations, we can continue to move forward in the sake of progress. We start to see technology, innovation, right? You think of the cell phone. Cell phones over the last 10 years have really added a lot of apps. They've added more connectivity, but the main core fundamentals, it really hasn't changed, other than they've made it a little bit smaller. I got the internet, I can make a phone call. Some of the technologies we see today are getting made on the same assumptions we've had in nutrient management for the last several years, and how they continue to move that forward. They're just trying to make it easier. What if we had an opportunity to challenge the status quo by the involvement and the time that we invest through this process? The other thing about nutrient management, as we think about it over time, is it's somewhat complex. And I say somewhat lightly because it's actually extremely complex. But we start to look at where's our information to help us make the decisions. Is that from the university? Is that from my consultant sitting in the chair next to me? Right? It's a lot of different places we have to go and find that information and try to correlate it all together and try to make some decisions off of it. So now we think about all those things. How can we make progress in those areas? So now again, I challenge you to think about, where's your seat on the bus? As a farmer, as a researcher, maybe part of the industry, part of extension service, regulatory, things like that, right? Many of you can maybe remember this. Some of you that are a little bit younger probably don't. But I remember when the Dietrich bus used to pick us up on the rural route, I was always sitting in the back, right? You always sat in the back. Was there shenanigans happening? It was usually a rougher ride because you're behind the axles. But if you're on the back of the bus, how can we make progress to maybe get you towards the front of the bus? Okay? If you're already in the front of the bus and feel like you're really trying to learn and be here with us today and be at the forefront, how can we make that a better view? Or maybe over time, when we start to look at our investment and that progress, maybe we can change the bus. Maybe we can challenge the status quo and we can turn that bus into something like this, right? How can we make it more streamlined? How can we have the leather seats, the massaging, and everything else? How do we make it a premium experience and a premium opportunity for our yield goals and our opportunity? So when we think of progress, as we go forward from historical to the now, changing our seat on the bus, wherever you are in your journey of nutrient management, is we want to try to take that macro environment. We want to try to take some of those assumptions and we want to bring them down to your level, right where you sit in the chairs you are today. We want to get it to your acres, to your growers, to your business. You're going to see throughout the sessions that the value and the power of taking that large data set and making it local. We also want to make access to it, right? We talked about technology and changing. We want to make access to the tools that you're going to see today so that way you can get that information quicker, be more efficient, buy back or create an opportunity for time. And then we wanted to make it easy. We want to make sure that it's transparent, it's simple to use, and it's connected to you. Whatever process or whatever stage you're at in your nutrient management and sampling cycle, we want to make sure that it's available for you. So we think about time and we think about progress. We said that we've been doing this for 4 years. We've had a ton of progress with the team growing and everything else, and where we've come today is really, really exciting. So we think as a team, the time is now, right here at Summer Agronomy Conference. We're starting that progress today. So again, as we think through the day, what's your time worth? Right? I want to start to think, is it my time worth getting it back with my wife? If you want to look at time management, don't follow me. It took me 12 years to take my wife to Mexico, and she asked every one of those 12 years if we were going somewhere on vacation. Maybe it's just to make more money. Maybe it's ROI. How do we get every dollar that we can out of that acre, or how do we create another opportunity for investment to get that next chunk of land, or to get to that farm that's maybe being transitioned, or to expand my business to bring it farther forward. Or maybe it's just a passion project, right? Maybe some of you have the desires to start a podcast, write a book. Maybe you want to go do some charity work, things like that. How can we use our time and our investment to get us to those goals of being part of the nutrient management industry? So with the time being now at Summer Agronomy Conference, we're here to really talk about where we've got through Radicle agronomics and where the ecosystem and all the passion and hard work and desire that all of our teams have put in. And it really comes down to a better set of tools connected to you in the field. This is about you guys, right? This is about nutrient management, but ultimately it's about you. So we start with the Radicle app, right? That's step one in progress of how we start to make it easier, connected to you and your fields from the beginning and planning stages all the way through the analysis stage, and even farther on as we look into the future with recommendations. And you're going to see some of the data today through the sessions of how to start thinking about moving that needle in those areas. Next, we wanted to get some more time and efficiency in the field. So we look at the GeoPress. You're going to see them around the venues and things today as well. But this is in the field. This is at point of collection. How do I get better? How do I get more consistent? How do I become more representative of those cores that I'm taking? And then finally, the Radicle lab. This is the real horsepower. This is where you're going to see how do we get that analysis? How do we get that consistency? And how do we continue to move that forward with our analysis over time? So progress over perfection, above and beyond just a set of tools, like I mentioned very briefly, is the consistency. Now we have the opportunity to try to minimize and shrink some of the variables that we can control. Get back into the education, again, while we're here today. Us learning from you, you learning from us. We're not going to get it all right. We're not going to have all the answers. But again, we're going to continue to move that needle ever so slightly. The data side of things, you're going to see again as part of that education. But again, it's how do we utilize that data? How do we understand that data? But then the progress is going to be your investment. Again, the investment of time you've made to be here today, or the investment that you're making as you start to look at your nutrient management and fertility programs. And then finally, there's going to be a lot of questions. We don't have all the answers, but we have more questions, right? And we're going to continue to expose more questions, and some of those questions might be hard, but that's our goal and our job as we challenge the status quo, is to try to get through and understand those questions and prove or disprove what we can. That's in our control and our investment as we look at progress. So as we think about this, as we go through the rest of the day, thinking about the time, the investment, how you get involved, how you connect with your peers, we're going to have our breakouts. So as you look at the breakouts today, we're going to have the Radicle experience. We're going to show you the suite of tools. Eli and the team are going to go through with Adam and others and say, this is how it works. This is where it fits. Maybe it fits in your business at this point. Maybe it fits in your business at this point. So they're going to go through and show you how it works. Then we're going to start to get into the research side of things. Again, trying to look at those questions that we bring up or the questions we can answer. So we're going to see Corey and the other parts of the agronomy team and Nick talk about the results that we have, the insights they're learning from a lot of the research that we're doing on bringing it from that macro scale down to the micro scale, and show you how timing and placement and things look like that way. Then we're going to get into Supersize Me. This is going to be with Brad, and this is an excellent talk, right? We think of supersize, what is that? McDonald's, right? The golden arches. But really what this comes down to is, do I need to feed the crop or do I not feed the crop, right? Understanding what that nutrition is. So McDonald's has done a good job of trying to feed everybody. Not saying the nutrition was right, but they've done a good job. So Brad has a really good talk today. Then you're going to be in a session with Drew Reynolds way out in the back of the building. It's going to be narrowing the guardrails of fertility management. And what he will show you is some very, very interesting data and thought-provoking data and challenging as we look at the consistency of the results that we're getting and what you can do to get involved to understand that at your level on the farm. And then finally at the end, all of these questions, we're going to have the open mic.